32 cars are entered for the final race of the weekend, the endurance race for GT cars, and the bulk of them are GT2 Porsches drawn from the FIA series and from the various national championships. There are a couple, quite literally, of GT1 entries, and among them is a stalwart of the class and of the series, Jean-Luc Marie-Laribière, joined in his regular McLaren by American Ron Atapatu and by Emmanuel Clerico, standing in for Laurent Lecoyer. They had problems in qualifying, and that meant that John Greasley, Jeff Lister and Magnus Wallinder were virtually unopposed in the run to pole position, although they weren't without problems of their own. But the GT1 Porsche secured the hot spot on the front row, and that was the car which dominated this race a year ago, remember.
Yeah, I think we will have a competition after all, and the Marcus looks very fast this weekend, so we'll see after 3 hours.
Quickest of the GT2 brigade was a good performance from the V8 Marcos of Koreuser, 2/10 ahead of the Porsches. That's a very satisfying performance on a wide, flat circuit, remember, which obviously suits this front-engine car.
The car is very good here. We had a very good setup. We have good tires, we have good drivers, we have good engines, so I think everything suits for us here.
Second fastest of the GT2 class, 2/10 slower than the Marcos, and quickest of the Porsches by more than a second was a good result for Claudia HURTGEN, locked in battle with Franz KONRAD for the award as Porsche Driver of the Year. The veteran KONRAD was the man right behind her on the timesheet, although a gap of 1 second isn't that close, especially with only a tenth between him and the man behind.
Yes, the weekend started very bad for us. We blew up an engine in the first practice session. I did only a half a lap. So we changed engine. The engine come from Germany in, the old another engine stock in Miami on the airport. And then I go out the second day, I did another lap, a charger blows up. So it was a nice beginning. And then we find all the problems, and now everything goes well. I have here my co-driver Nick Ham from the American races, and so I think we can do a good race.
And you'd want to after spending a frightening amount of money like that. Problems during qualifying for the McLaren placed it 5th on the grid for the start, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll still be in difficulty come race day. Greasley and co will have a battle on their hands, especially in a 3-hour race into darkness, when tyre wear and fuel strategies will all have a role to play in deciding the outcome of GT1 and GT2. One race left on the schedule for the weekend, and it's the 3-hour GT race, which this year will start at 5 p.m. in the evening and take the big cars into the darkness, finishing at 8. The usual festivities ahead of the start, but the drivers probably wishing the celebrations would end so they can get on with the job in hand. It's late afternoon and it's time to go racing. John Greasley will be the first man in the number 2 Porsche, the big GT1 car, while Pim van Riet will be the start driver in the number 40 Marcos alongside him on the grid. Claudia HURTGEN will begin proceedings in the ROC GT2 Porsche, and of course she lines up on row 2 beside her rival Franz KONRAD. He too will be in the driving seat right next to her in the number 31 car when the green light lets them go at the rolling start. Out of sight of this grid, Emmanuel Clerico starts the BBA McLaren. There it is on row 3, and newly crowned French national champion Patrice Gouselard will be the first to take the wheel of the Labre Porsche, number 35, as he tests out his ambition to race in the FIA series next year and win Le Mans. Tall order qualifying has perhaps thrown the form book into just a little bit of disarray. It's not been without problems for everybody. This should be the form book favourite, but they haven't had it all their own way. The McLaren should be right up there alongside. They haven't had it all their own way. And once again, we're seeing the value of those super dependable GT2 Porsches, which have been so much fun during this series in previous seasons. Green light and away they go, and it is GREASLEY turning into the right-hander ahead of everybody else. And the big GT1 car rides this circuit so smoothly. If John GREASLEY looked in his mirrors right now, he'd see a completely different sight to that serene emptiness in front of him. It's extremely busy behind him. The rest of the field looking to stay with him and sort themselves out. Claudia HURTGEN is in second place in the number 38 car. And that's the view she's got of the big Porsche. Not running away from her, as you might perhaps expect. Clerico is in third place, KONRAD fourth, but here comes the BBA McLaren moving up through the field, only to be expected. Remember, this is a 3-hour race though. What we saw in all of the BPR races were a series of 1-hour sprints nailed together by pit stops, and perhaps that's going to be the characteristic of this one, but there is something completely different on the leaderboard. That's as they went past the start-finish line, but you can quite clearly see that although John GREASLEY is still in the lead, the McLaren has now moved up to second, and the GT1 battle has been joined. Manuel Clerico, the start driver in the McLaren, is already getting serious about this and finding a way past the Porsche of John GREASLEY. Well, John GREASLEY, British national champion in GTs this year, not an experienced international competitor. He'd be the first to accept that. He's done his racing at home this year, and perhaps Clerico is slightly better placed in the BBA McLaren. There's someone who isn't very well placed at all. Stuck in the gravel is Ben Livens in the Porsche. And at the moment it is the number 1 car making the running. Headlights on and beginning to show up quite clearly. You can see that this was a late start as the leaders start to mix it with the GT2 cars. The headlight warning, which lets the slower cars know they're coming, isn't going to work for very much longer. It's dusk already. You can see the brakes glowing inside the rims there on the McLaren. Claudia HURTGEN also wanting to get on terms with the big GT1 car, doing a brilliant job. She has got an awful lot to race for. Remember, there's an award for Porsche's Driver of the Year, but it's more than just a piece of silverware, and perhaps a season of racing, or the cost of a season racing might depend on it. Big puff of smoke from the tail end of that car. It's done that in the past though, and need not necessarily be that significant. It might indicate that there are problems though. This is the race leader, and you can see now that sunset has arrived. Darkness is shortly to fall, and that's the end of the Saleen Mustang by the look of it. 34, the car started by Adam Topping, goes into the pits. And you can see the GT1 car of Clerico lapping particularly quickly now. La Riviere taking over in the second stint. Claudia HURTGEN still tailing the big GT1 car, still looking for, and finding perhaps here, well, will she find a way past there? We've seen it happen earlier on in the Diablo race. That was quite a nice passing place, but not this time around. And that's the number 22 Lamborghini of Philippe Chariol, entered in this race partly, I think, for the sake of exuberance. The Diablos run without lights, and there will come a time when they will have to withdraw, and that's another one of them out. So it looks as though darkness has arrived. Frank Kramer in the pits as well as the race continues. Fuel stops, tyre wear, all of these things to be taken into account. And the GT2 cars might have an advantage. They might just be gentler on tyres, they might be gentler on fuel. Always the Marcos in GT2 had an advantage that its fuel consumption meant that it could stop for less time in the pits. Oh, look at that. Just went straight past. Well, that may well be indicative of a problem in the GT1 Porsche, because the number 38 GT2 car has been waiting to do that for a while. You couldn't have telegraphed the desire to overtake any more, so it's not all going terrifically smoothly for everybody.
Franz, good first drive, but still a little way behind Claudia.
Yeah, it's no way to follow Claudia. We make a choice with harder compound and go 2 stints. I think was the wrong choice. They changed tires and go with the softer ones. I think that'd be the better way, so let's see.
Strategy, strategy, strategy. There's a lot to it in this class. Remember that Claudia HURTGEN and Franz KONRAD are battling for a trophy entirely separated from this race. And now Jeff Lister in the GT1 Porsche has got to see if he can make up some ground. Pit stops always confuse the positions, so it takes a while for things to settle back down again. At the moment, though, it is still that same order with the GT1 McLaren of La Riviere Atapatu and Emmanuel Clerico up front, followed by Claudia HURTGEN and then Franz KONRAD, and then the GT1 Porsche of John GREASLEY and Jeff Lister and Magnus Wallinder. The McLaren definitely the class of the field at the moment. And even this wide track, and we've said that a couple of times how wide and easy to drive it is, but once it's busy like this, you can see that the GT1 cars continually going faster than the GT2s have to work very hard. That said, they're not alone in that, and someone working a bit too hard. That's one of the Marcoses, or Mark-I, if that's the correct plural for the make. Rejoining, this is the KONRAD Porsche. You heard what Franz KONRAD said about tyre compounds. They think they've made the wrong choice. They think that's given the lead of their particular contest to the 38 car of Claudia HURTGEN and Stefan ORTELLI. He didn't look like a very happy man in the pits, but there's still half a race left to go. Into the pits comes the GT1 Porsche for its handover and turnaround. Always a little bit reluctant to get going, but now it's away. And back out onto the circuit. You can see that dusk lasts quite a long time here. The light has been fading gradually for quite a while. It's not dark, but it is just a little bit dingy now as the big GT1 Porsche gets back in the hunt, and this is what it's hunting. Still in 4th place coming out of the pits and still looking at trying to get past the Marcos of Coral. And the McLaren perhaps not as quick now. Remember that as they pass the cars around, some drivers are quicker on any given circuit than others, and just how they organise that is part of the strategy. For Oyser and Pim van Riet, it has to be said that Oyser was definitely quicker around the Zhuhai circuit than his partner. And onto the grass and around in a complete 360 goes the McLaren. Well, that won't have helped at all. Emmanuel Clerico's hopes of victory may just have evaporated with that little spin. Darkness is upon us. Oh, he's not the only one. That's the KONRAD Porsche. That was the number 31 car. That was Franz Conrad's car. Somewhere it's rejoined, so all hope is not lost, but certainly that won't have done Franz Conrad's hopes any good at all. Drama now as darkness falls over Zhuhai. Claudia HURTGEN in front of the McLaren after a spin. Oh, and another spin for the KONRAD Porsche. Well, things are going from bad to worse. Keep it going and try and dig it out of the gravel. If it's beached there, it's all over. Struggling in reverse. It's on the grass and back out onto the racetrack, and again does rejoin. Well, perhaps a tyre problem because it's happened so very quickly. Turbo's glowing underneath the car. It's been an and that's a very expensive weekend. I was going to say it's been an expensive weekend for Franz Conrad, even more expensive for the Rock team. That's the number 39 car, and that is definitely an insurance write-off, and no mistake about that. It's all over. That may yet bring out a red flag. The safety crews are there. It's under control, but that might see the race stop. It's certainly going to see yellow flags out and even a safety car out, and that is going to close this race back up. On board in the number 38 Porsche of Claudia HURTGEN, the other Rock car, and you can see that the track is half blocked there, and something must be done about that. There's the safety car. It is out on the circuit, and the fire now almost completely out. But while the safety car is out there, any lead which Claudia HURTGEN might have drawn away from everybody else in the preceding 2 hours is now going to evaporate. They'll close right up, and it's going to be a sprint to the checkered flag from here. And that means it's even Stevens with anybody in with a shout. Now, it depends, and that looks like the GT1 Porsche in trouble on the gravel trap. Things not looking too good for John GREASLEY and the rest of the crew. Pit stop time and a sprint to the checkered flag, but is it all too late? Was that a problem for the car? Was it a tyre problem? Rejoins quite happily, sounds fine.
We've got no fourth gear, and it's beginning to get worse, so it's going to be a bit touch and go, but the Rook car should have had to stop for fuel by now, so I don't know whether it's going to make it to the end or not.
Well, there's the answer, brinkmanship from the Rock team, but it comes in the end, and that puts them a pit stop level with the number 1 car, so that should even things out. But the GT1 Porsche, as you heard, minus 4th gear, that might account for it running a little bit wide, and now anything could happen. Every second in the pits will be hurting. And out goes Stefan ORTELLI, and that tells you everything you need to know. The GT1 car in the lead, the Porsche leads, and it is the a little bit of a wheel arch fire for Porsche. Marcos quickly extinguished. That doesn't look as if it lasted long enough to do any damage, except frighten one mechanic very badly indeed. On board in the Porsche, there is the McLaren, which lost a lot of time. We saw it spinning around earlier on, so it's not a factor. We saw the P1 board held out for John GREASLEY's number 2 GT1 car. Brake discs glowing in the darkness. It's on its way to the checkered flag. Claudia HURTGEN had to stop for fuel, and this is the moment the team have been waiting for. There is the checkered flag at the end of 3 hours racing into the night, and the form book has been satisfied in the closing moments of this race. Victory for the GT1 Porsche by 2 minutes at the end of the day over the second place McLaren. That makes it sound like a formality, but there is very seldom any such thing in motorsport, as we've just seen. And John GREASLEY, British National GT champion and a stalwart of this class of racing since its inception, knows that only too Porsche